I made my own GitHub Action. But what is a GitHub Action and why would you even build one yourself? Well, it's basically an automated workflow that runs inside GitHub. It can build projects, run tests, generate files, or automate boring, goofy brain-consuming tasks every time you push code. Most devs just use existing actions, but sometimes you hit a limit. Maybe an action is too opinionated. Maybe it depends on a third-party service. Or maybe you just want full control. So in this video, I will show you why I built my own GitHub Action and what problem it solves. A lot of GitHub stat tools rely on public APIs hosted on Vercel. That works until it doesn't. Because these public instances are shared, they are limited by API quotas and rate limits. When too many people use the same endpoint, request starts failing not because your project is broken, but because the infrastructure hits the limit. This is not about blaming Vercel or GitHub, it's just how shared infrastructure works. If an action depends on a public service, you're also depending on its traffic, uptime, and limits. So, instead of fixing symptoms, I tried a different approach. What if the logic ran directly inside a GitHub action? No public API, no external hosting, no shared rate limit, just GitHub running on its own infrastructure. The problem was started on late November to early December 2025, where the GitHub Readme stats deployment instance is down. I have switched to a different approach. I temporarily used the user statistician repo, where I can generate a detailed SVG stats cars for my GitHub profile Readme, and that fixed the GitHub stats problem temporarily. The user statistician GitHub action helped me show the stats, but for projects, including the My Projects and My Gists section, that doesn't work. And here is what a part of my GitHub Readme looks like. If that GitHub Readme stat about my projects and my gists are broken. What if I build my own GitHub action to fetch some repos and some gists? I cleaned up the entire section in here, created a GitHub Actions workflow called creations.yml or email. And that's the initial code. Let's see the outcome of this exact GitHub action. Well, the entire GitHub profile Readme was ruined. I have changed dozens of codes one by one. It fixed, but damage has been done by the first version of the prototype. After the successful run on this workflow, I restored deleted parts. What if I wanted to exclude two repos such as the profile Readme and the source codes repo? I tried a fix provided by ChatGPT, but then it went nuts. Prototype GitHub action removed every single repo, instead of excluding some things. I provided a fix, like this, and it actually fixed it, by including every single repo, except the excluding repos. I added some new actions such as excluding forks and adding stargazers and description.
A few moments later.
Many errors happened. I cannot find out the origin and the source of this error. I tried the fix, which escapes the new line. That fix doesn't work, so I added that fix, which doesn't work.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
I converted exclusions to the JSON array, which kinda works. And after some countless formatting changes, this happened. The list just becomes slightly beautiful by adding these markers, the star count, and the description. Great success. The prototype of the My Creations workflow succeeded. I tried updating some descriptions of every single repo, and it works. It took 7 errors to make the prototype work. I use the actions checkout GitHub Action, then I set environment variables such as GitHub user, target file, and exclusions. I created an output called generated.md. Then I added a repositories header into the output. Next, it covers the exclusions into an array. Then it fetches from the GitHub API. If you use the same API into a public Vercel instance, rate limiting errors will skyrocket, and in this case the Vercel instance got exploded. So I fetched directly into GitHub. Then I use that bash command. It excludes the archived repos, forked ones. It includes the stargazing count and the description. But for exclusions, if the repo name matches the exclusions, it skips. And finally, it prints the repo name. So in this case, it shows 4 repositories. If I remove these from exclusions, the repository section will look like this. I use a different logic to fetch gists. So in this case, that code adds the gist header and then fetches every single gist I've created in GitHub. Here is what the code looks like. On the next step, it picks the start and end tags, like creations start and creations end. It adds the contents from generated.md straight into the Readme, but making sure that it is placed in between these tags. Up next is committing and pushing it. I set the username and user email. Checks if it has no difference. It prints no changes to commit and exits the action. Otherwise, it adds the readme, then commits with updated project list and pushes it. And that's the overall result of the prototype GitHub action. Since the prototype is successful, now it's time to convert that into a production-ready GitHub action.
A few moments later.
Finally, after some struggle, I have created a simple GitHub action that does completely nothing from now on. What? I should have used the template repository instead of initializing it from scratch, but no worries. I have used the test in and test out as an input and output just to test the GitHub action, but since it's successful, I will add some inputs, for example, the GitHub username to show gists and repositories, exclusions to exclude from showing it, target file, for example readme.md as default if you don't set it, the limit. It limits how many repos and gists to show, for example 25. 25 is good, or 20. I will also include show archives option, show forks. I have decided to include the commit message also, which shows a custom commit message. I have then included required false to those which is not required, for example exclusions, target files, limit. Only the GitHub username is required. Then I have added the default option with empty string. It's for GitHub username and for exclusions. But on the outputs, I will add results, where the description is a markdown list containing repos and gists list. I have added another input, which called show gist stargazers, which is an option to show stars count on gists. That's the complete setup of this GitHub action. Think of it like a metadata. I have just wrote the sample code in here, and since this is a test code, I will clear that. I have created a test.markdown to show the results in here. I have changed my mind to set it as a JSON list. Here I made 2 steps for testing, which is now replaced with a 1 step that uses GitHub username, exclusions, and target file. I use test.md as a target file this time. Instead of 1 limit, I will show 2 limits. The repo limit, which shows default value as 20, gist limit, which shows default value as 10. In here, let's initialize some values from inputs such as username, exclusions, target file, repo limit and gist limit, show archives, show forks, show gist stargazers. I've changed the input option here also. Then a commit message. Let's add the sample console log flag thing. The core info command outputs everything directly right here. All of these tests are shown right there. If I try starting the GitHub Actions job locally, it brings actis not recognized as an internal or external command. Okay, let's install that. I will change the error message also. Like this. There we go, it's successfully installed. Let's try that again.
Bruh. A few minutes later.
Refresh the components. Oh Well, let's restart the Visual Studio Code or VS Code again. There we go. The Octokit has been installed. Let's run that job locally. What the actual What just happened then? Oh, it also recommends to install Docker Engine also. To first install Docker Engine, I should have installed the Windows subsystem for Linux or WSL, but I will choose a lighter Linux distro for that. Okay. I should have compiled it. Okay. I will run that command to compile that action. I hope that new compiled version will show the output. There we go. Now I got some information like the username, exclusions, the target file. That's great. Oh, the show gist stargazers should be a boolean input, so let's add the boolean input. There we go. It now shows the username as string, exclusions as string, which will be divided with these. Target file, the repo limit, and show gist stargazers as boolean values. Commit message as string. Let's try running in here. It is the Docker engine.
Much later.
I have finally installed WSL. Let's install the Debian one.
Later.
I am using the Debian version of Windows subsystem for Linux.
A few moments later.
There we go. I have initialized the Debian prompt. Let's install Docker Engine on here. Then use this. Let's run the basic.
Bruh.
Let's the start Docker and the status Docker. There we go. After running the Docker engine, I hope that, oh no.
One eternity later.
And finally installing, yeah. to make sure the GitHub Actions see that the Docker is installed. Okay, I need another restart.
One restart later.
There we go. We are now in the Docker, but I will not sign in. The Nectos Act is installed, the Docker engine is now running. There we go! Let's run that workflow locally. Okay, we got the same error. Despite I reinstalled Docker straight into the Windows.
The next day.
Sorry, but that approach doesn't fix it. I tried locally running the GitHub Action, but that doesn't work. My only way, I guess, is to change something, compile it, push it. Now let's replace that sample into this. This covers the text into an array, but first let's make it to exclusions.txt. Now it accepts as a string array.
One code compilation and git commit later.
It returns repos correctly as an array style. That's great. Let's apply some logic. For that, let's use Octokit. npm install Octokit. Let's try importing it. It's type safe. Though I should have get the token, the GitHub token. There we go. Where I use the token environment variable from that action.
Soon after.
But I don't think it is a type safe approach.
A lot of boring math later.
I will install the Octokit REST. Since that is the correct approach, that just installing Octokit. Installing the Octokit REST will work. So here, let's import from Octokit REST. Since the Octokit has now a type safe support, it lets me autocomplete some things. I am creating the asynchronous function called run, where I move every single data into here, and finally the Octokit initialization command here. And in this case, let's type the run function with the catch. During that, let's set the error message and type process exit 1. Exit 1. Say process exit 1 should be applied right here. Now let's work on this function. Now let's get the repo data. First, we will create the const data, where it should be destructured from Octokit repos list for user function with the following properties like username and the per page, which is a repo limit. And let's show the output by using the core info.
One code compilation and git commit later.
We got the data. We got the overall repo data. And since it's using the GitHub token from the GitHub action, using the GitHub API inside the GitHub action is safe. Let's see what I got. I will use these properties for the GitHub action. Since we got the data, next, let's get the repos by filtering the data and check if it's not disabled. Map through the repo to create a new array consisting of name, HTML URL, which is the entire GitHub repo URL, description, forks count, stargazers count, watchers count, language, forks, archived, license, and visibility. Then return these values as an object.
One code compilation and git commit later.
As you guys can see, it works. Even though it's public, I added a second condition to check if it is not disabled and it is not private. Since the forks and forks count is the same, I will include only one. Now we got the repos array. Since I have show archives and show forks, I have added another condition where it filters the entire array to check if it is allowed to show forks or if it's allowed to show archives. Since these two options are false, they will hide it. Since I have the exclusions array, let's make it into a set. Including the condition by typing exclusions has repo name. But instead of including it, let's exclude it.
One code compilation and git commit later.
On the next change, I have moved the exclusions as a third condition alongside not disabled and not private condition. I only compared the repo fork with repo archived.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
It now fixed the issue by including this. I can exclude some repos, but these options don't work. Let's try this approach to see if that approach works. What the hell? What the hell? It excluded everything else, including forks and archives. Oh my god. That's a lot of piece of shit anyways. If show forks is false, all non-fork repos are removed. If show archives is false, all non-archived repos are removed. If both are false, you get an empty list. That's exactly an empty list. Something doesn't work.
A lot of boring math later.
Here is the approach. If there is an opposite value of show archives and the repo itself is archived, exclude it. The same goes to the forks. Finally, return true once these conditions don't met. This is the more readable option out of here. We got this 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, this works finally! There we go! We have created the same functionality. This is what I want. That code here is the prototype repo, and that code here is the finished one. This part of the code is the equivalent of this. That part of a code is the equivalent of that following code. But the difference is, I used it here, .archived false, .fork false, but in here, it depends on the values of the show archives and show forks options. Difference here is I include name, the URL, the stargazers count, description otherwise no description. But in this case, I have included not only the name, HTML URL, description and the stargazers count, but also checks if it is a fork, if it is archived, plus includes the forks count, watchers count. That part, which skips exclusions, is the equivalent of that condition inside the first filter function of the repo. And with that, we have created a single repo onto the gist part. Okay, this time I will rename the data to repo data to avoid confusion. And replace it. Instead of data filter, let's use the data map function. Okay, this case stargazers does not exist. Nice. I will remove the show gist stargazers. I have added a new option in here called include gists, which includes gists created by the mentioned GitHub user, and the default is true. There we go. Oh, data, gist data. There we go. Now let's create a type. I have created a types.ts right here. I will include the name, URL, description, fork, forks, stars, watchers, archived, and license, which I will use that object. Archived should be boolean. This should be I repository or I git repo. I will use it as an I git repo array description. Description or no description. There we go. I have the I git repo type here. I have created two more types, including the I git gist type, which includes the URL and description, the iResult type, which includes repositories and gists. Then I have added these as an iGetGist type. Instead of a run, let's use async function fetch data. The return type should be promise iResult. Return repositories, repos, then gists. Otherwise, it returns repositories as repos but gists an empty array. I will use the null here, like this.
One code compilation and git commit later.
There we go. It returns the correct data of any gists. Now let's compare the gist function. Okay, let's change something. I've added untitled gist to those which doesn't have description. This part fetches the data with the default GitHub username with 100 gists, but in this case I use the username option with gist limit option. Then it includes description, otherwise untitled gist, same right here, and the URL. Here I have 4 repositories, and there we go. I used 4 repositories and 2 gists. 2 gists right here. Nice. I rewrote the bash logic into here as a Typescript. And it's better. Let's simplify this part, I guess. The logic has been simplified, and honestly, it's a lot better.
One code compilation and git commit later.
It brings it to the same result. For testing purposes, I have set the show archives to true, include gists as false. It includes the archived repos and no gists. All I need is to add these into the target file and use the custom commit message or the default one. Let's create a new Typescript file called utils.ts, where I move the fetch data to here, including imports as well. Then I'm gonna import the fetch data function. Oh, I forgot to add the export. There we go. I not only create the fetch data function, I will create 2 more functions, place content and commit and push. For testing purposes in test.markdown file, I will add the my creations as a sample header, these comment tags, for example creation start, creations end, and finally the more gists as a proof that it doesn't break. I will use tag like this. Okay, let's copy these comment tags, place it right here. This detects the comments, like the creation start and creations end. Then I will add the target file from input. I will import the fs and path. Before that, I will add the generated content as a parameter. I will add the file path, which resolves the target file path. Then I will show the contents of this file using the read file sync. Then I will pick the start index of this comment and the end index of this comment. If these indexes don't exist, it throws a new error saying the creations tag's not found. If it is found, it picks the before and after using the slice method. Then it replaces the content. It writes the file completely. Up next is the commit and push message. I will make it an asynchronous function. For committing and pushing, I will import the exec function, which in this case executes the command. First, I will get the commit message from the input. Then I will get the target file from the input. I will execute the following command to set up the GitHub Actions username and GitHub Actions email. If GitHub token exists, I will set the remote origin URL. I use the git dev quiet to check if there is no error. It prints no changes to commit and exits the process. If the error code is 1, which means some changes are detected, then it skips the entire functionality. If the real error exists, it prints the real error and uses process.exit1. Then I will add the command to add the target file, use the commit message, and push the commit automatically to the mentioned repository. In here, let's create an async function run. which it fetches repositories and Gists data. Oh, I forgot to export these functions. Export function place content, export async function, commit and push. I will import place content and commit and push functions to finalize the entire process. I will create a markdown constant, which value is the repositories heading, to show all of these. Let's map through data repositories and add a list like this, where the link text is the repository name, the link URL is the repository URL, followed by a stargazers count description. We will make it to string by using the new line as a separator, followed by a new line. Now I am checking if data gist exists. I will add the gists data also by adding the header into the markdown called gists. Then mapping to the gists data by adding a list which uses the link name as a description, and the link itself is the gist URL, which also uses the new line as a separator to join them. Now let's print the result.
One code compilation and git commit later.
Oh, I forgot to use the run function. Okay, that's why.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
Let's replace that into a new line. Same goes to here. But I will make sure add the new line here.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
The repository scout here, it kinda works, but
Another code compilation and git commit later.
I don't think that's correct, even though it fetched the repositories. There we go. Yes! Yes! That's exactly what I want. That formatting is exactly what I want. There we go. Where is it? I just have recently added place content, commit and push functions. Oh, I should have removed the core info this time. It doesn't work. It didn't work. What's the problem this time? It works.
Dozens of code compilations and git commits later.
Oh, the test job is finished, and you f***ing piece of bullshit! Why does it return undefined? What if I add the environment variable like this? Oh env GitHub token. What? Resource not accessible by integration. 403. What just happened? Forbidden, oh my god. It means the server understands the request but refuses to fulfill it. What the heck? You f***ing piece of bullshit. Let's try different thing. Like GitHub token. Another one has an error, oh my god! Okay, that's the same error. Okay, I hope it work. What? Resource not accessible by integration. Even though repos list for users is allowed with default contents read, it is not allowed unless you enabled gist permission. Let's add the permissions right here. Oh I hope it fixes. Let it accept. What the heck? We got a warning called fetch gists. Token lacks permission, and it still doesn't work. It refuses to push. Let's replace exec to exec sync.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
Okay, I use the execsync function, which executes the function safely.
One code compilation and git commit later.
We got it! We got it! We did it! Let's try generating a token once again.
A little longer than a few minutes later. Later.
Nice. Well, shit again.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
The gists are also fetched. The gist didn't fetch because the GitHub token has been rate limited. So I created my own PAL token just to test it. And the test is a success here. I have created the successful GitHub action that replicates the results exactly like this. This is the result from my profile readme, and this is the result from the creations stats workflow GitHub action. It is a success. Let's remove it from here. Let's remove it from here also. From here also, and here. There we go. Once it's successful, I will return it back to the original GitHub token. The GitHub token got hit by a secondary rate limit. There we go. Otherwise, let's throw that error. I have successfully finished the first GitHub action, which accepts inputs like GitHub username, exclusions, target file, repo limit, gist limit, show archives, show forks, custom commit message, then include gists. It outputs this time a markdown list containing repos and gist list into the target markdown file. Example readme.md. No changes to commit, and it instantly exits. That's how that GitHub action works in the final version. Since I have made the username required, I added a validation. If username still empty string, it shows the error username is required. After adding the username validation, I have added the repo limit and gist limit validation. If the repo limit is negative, it brings an error. Repository limit should be positive. Same goes to gist. Let's test these validations by putting like this. Okay, we got an error. Username is required. Let's put the error plus process exit process exit 1. Process exit 1 means the application has been finished with an error. Oh no. There we go. It only says username is required. But in this case, repo limit is -5, for example. Repository limit should be positive. What about the gist limit? Let's test it. And we got another error. This time gist limit should be positive, which means validations work. There we go. I will add new validations if needed, but validations like this work. We have made the GitHub actions secure in case of inputting some values. And honestly, that validation check is similar to the forms validation check. I am trying a new feature that customizes the list itself. So I create an export function makeList, which accepts two parameters, val, which is the igit repo type, and a type, which is either minimal or detailed. If it is minimal, it returns the minimal list. Otherwise, it returns a detailed list, such as the repo name and URL, the repo description. If license exists, it shows the license, otherwise it shows unlicensed. Then stargazer count, forks count, and watchers count. Like this. Since I have changed the license to string, because I want to return only the license name, I will change things here. Instead of repo license, I will include only the repo license name. To make things better, add, for example, unlicensed here. Repo license name or unlicensed. I added a repo list design as an option with description, the default value, and I set that because that repo list design is not required to set manually. It sets to minimal because it accepts two values, minimal or detailed. I have added the error message and make list functions. I use getInput to get the raw input from repo list design. If it's not minimal or detailed, it outputs repo list design should be either minimal or detailed. I replace that string with the make list function that generates different list designs. And in here, I exported the function error message. Then I have made the make list function that returns the list design based on these types. Also, let's test the design. Repo list design to detailed.
One code compilation and git commit later.
Okay, it says update repos and gists stats. There we go! We got the detailed list, which includes the repo name, the repo description, the license stargazers. Okay, let's tweak the design a little bit. That's better.
Dozens of code compilations and git commits later.
It is updated. There we go. This is the detailed version of the repositories list, containing not only the stargazers count, but also the repo name, a repo link. For example, if I click on blog, it returns to my blog page, or if I click on idea checklist, for example, I go to idea checklist like this. Plus the repo description, repo license, and forks. The detailed version works very well. Let's see the code.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
Okay, this is exactly what I want. The detailed version of the repositories list. Let's change the repo list design by removing that option. It returns back to the minimal list. It just takes 60 workflow jobs to make the GitHub Action work exactly like on my prototype GitHub Action. You will see too much difference. I only use few lines like this, but on this case, there is too much bash scripts. I rewrote every single bash script into Typescript. This is the detailed version of the list. That's the minimal version of the list. I have created a logo mark for my project and also the icon. I use the repo oct icon as a GitHub Actions icon because it matches the purpose of the GitHub Action to generate repo and gist stats. Let's create a readme.md and start writing it.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
I have finished building readme.md, but things are broken because I haven't released that GitHub Action yet. Time to add it.
Later.
There we go, it has a solid readme even though it's sometimes broken. I have added the options table where I listed the option name with type, description, default value, and required. After making it public, it will be fixed. I did some other things off camera. I not only created the readme.md, but I also added code of conduct, the changelog, the pull request template plus issue templates. Then I have added a new feature called the comment tag name, where the default value is creations. I added the info here. Then I have reset the test.md to test these tags. I have set the one minimal and another one detailed. I have also changed the workflow by adding two jobs. One that generates the portfolio with minimal style, another one generates the same portfolio but with a detailed style. Then I added the comment tag name, which gets an input from this exact option. I added the validation right here. It checks if comment tag name is still an empty string. Then I have replaced the comment tags start and end from creations to the exact value of the comment tag name option, which the default is the creations tag. I have renamed the main.email to build.email.
One code compilation and git commit later.
And there we go. It works by adding the minimal repo list and the minimal comment tag and the detailed one in the detailed comment tag, all by changing the comment tag name. That's why it works. The thing is, GitHub actively censors the GitHub token. Let's give that workflow a name.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
There we go. Now the GitHub Action workflow has a correct name called Build the GitHub Action. These errors will be resolved once I publish this GitHub Action.
Many code compilations and git commits later.
The first says no changes to commit. The second also says no changes to commit. It works great. Let's customize the commit message also. We got updated portfolio stats using a minimal design and using a detailed design. The minimal design and the detailed design. That's great! Yes, it's possible and technically you're doing it right, but GitHub Action Spot user's email is a known email to GitHub.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Okay, let's use that email. The user email should be like this, and the username, which is a GitHub Action Spot, let's name it something like Creations Stats Action Bot.
One code compilation and git commit later.
Oh my god, this time what happened? Creation stats job failed. Command failed. Oh my god, let's keep it like GitHub Action Spot and compile it.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
There we go, the official GitHub Action Spot has been appeared after some changes. The creation stats workflow is now looking clean.
A few inches later.
The creation stats workflow is now active. Now I can upload the social preview. What the f just happened, you f***ing piece of bullshit? Okay, let's try that again. I think that's kinda good. There we go. The creations stats workflow is uploaded. This is what the repo card looks like. You can publish this into the GitHub Marketplace. Draft the release.
$2,000 years later.
It says improve your action by adding labels for icon and color. Everything looks good, you have all the required info. The primary category, let's use utilities because this GitHub Action is a utility. Okay, let's publish the release. The first version of the creation stats is published, and if I go there, it says use this GitHub Action with your project. Let's try using that GitHub Action inside my profile Readme. Let's try it. Let's go to GitHub Workflows, creations.yibble.
Later, after moving the prototype GitHub Action, fixing some bugs, and implemented the recent GitHub Action.
Oh no, we got that error. Unable to resolve action. Unable to find version 1. Okay, that's a common problem. Let's create a new type v1. Okay.
A few inches later.
There we go. There we go.
Later, after fixing the license badge bug.
Let's refresh it. It shows license MIT.
Later, after fixing another badge bug.
Total users 0, marketplace, contributors, the license, fork stars. I finally managed to create a GitHub Action for generating portfolio stats. That's a great job. How should I run the GitHub Action locally? To run GitHub Actions locally, you can use the Act CLI tool, which allows you to test your workflows without pushing changes to GitHub. I have a Docker desktop, then install Act. Okay. Okay, let's install GitHub Local Actions. It says Nectos Act is not installed, Docker Engine. Even though it exists, it is not running. Well, let's restart it.
A few inches later.
Nectos Act has been installed, and let's run the Docker engine.
Many minutes later.
Docker engine itself is running. Nice. npm start. Let's use the medium one. Allow.
A few moments later.
What? Failed to resolve. That's the internet issue. Let's connect to the different Wi-Fi.
Many internet reconnections later.
Okay, let's try that again.
2,000 years later.
Let's use that same command to build a GitHub Action. Okay.
1 eternity later.
It says success setup job. May check out. Success. Coded read from repo. Make sure you have the correct access rights and the repo exists. Okay, this time the job is failed. I have created a contributing.md for that GitHub Action. And if I run npm start here, it will work. There we go. Now we have a readme, license, code of conduct. I guess that part of a code remains stuck forever. I hope it isn't stuck. Oh, what? Oh, I still got the same error. The problematic code was the commit and push message. Let's add the condition if it is not process.env.act. Oh, I still got repository not found. Well, let's add stdio inherit. Instead of this, let's use x-access token. Couldn't resolve hostname? My god. Here I added a final change. If process env act is true, then it says skipping git push under act and return. And okay, that's good. I have replaced the process exit one into throw new error message because that approach is safe. I have included the filter boolean because without that, the exclusions will likely include the empty string also. I also did the slice 0 parse and repo limit into the repos array for clarity also. I have added a check if I run the GitHub action locally, it skips the entire commit and push process. And also I have updated the origin URL setup by adding the X access token. Since that part is a bug, I have replaced it into one git remote set URL origin command on the latest patch. Then I have fixed the detailed list formatting, which results in a change like this. After that, I have changed the comment tag error message to apply not only the creations tag, but on every single comment tag. If I run the GitHub action locally, it will generate the content inside the terminal. Otherwise, it will write the file. Then I have added the env.example to showcase the environment variable without linking it. That's the summary of recent changes after initializing act. It's all mentioned in the contributing.md. It now generates a preview. There we go, the content preview on the minimal style looks like this, but on the detailed style it looks like this. I have implemented the local run feature for developers to run that GitHub action locally, but the difference is it will show the preview. I think the GitHub action is totally complete until it is not. Why? That GitHub action completely removed the Gist list. Why did the GitHub action remove the Gist list? Because of another rate limit error. What the heck? What the heck creation stats workflow? Ah, come on. Okay, it's time to fix this. Because I have found the cause of a stupid error. That's the typing issue. I have changed the value of the gist, which is either the iGetGist list or skipped. Let's return repositories repos. Gist in this case is skipped, like this. And return the same result, like this. In index, if data gist is skipped, it is not skipped. Let's try doing that change.
One code compilation and git commit later.
It's still no changes to commit. Okay, but how do I update the tags? Failed to push some reps. Updates were rejected because the tag already existed in the remote. It already exists, but it was deleted! Oh my god, how do I update it? Git push origin res tags version 1.0.1. Git push origin version 1.0.1. Okay, let's force it. Oh my god! Git tag. We have a one tag. There we go. I had a typo on here, but since I have updated the tags, there we go, it's fixed. Let's try testing the new update by reverting the entire change. Like this. No changes to commit, but in this case the error is gone. It was ignored. Even though the logic is good, I guess that comparison feels unsafe. I created a function called hasGist, which accepts gist as a parameter, which type is either the gist list or skipped. And the return type is a condition if the gist parameter is iGetGist array, which is the gist array. It returns the condition if gist is not skipped. Let's update the logic here. I tried a scenario where in this case, for example, gist data got rate limit. I will simulate using that code. I will later remove that. It removed it. Oh my god. The problematic function was this. Okay, it still becomes problematic because using that one tag doesn't fix anything. I removed two features, include gists and comment tag name, and instead added two new features, the repo tag name and gist tag name. I have added these two new features in here. I have updated the test.markdown to add the gists list. I have added the gist tag name and repo tag name as GitHub Action inputs. If repo tag name is not empty, fetch the repo data and return some values as object. If gist tag name is not empty, it should be is not empty. The condition is wrong. From now on it tests the error, but then I uncommented that logic. I added the gist couldn't be fetched warning. If the fetch failed or the gist tag name does not exist, it returns repositories and the gists are skipped. If the repo tag name is still empty, it returns both of them as skipped. Otherwise, it returns both repos and gists. I made the comment tag name from a GitHub Action input to a parameter for a place content function. Since I have made the repositories type from iGetRepoArray to iGetRepoArray or skipped, I implemented the same logic as on hasGist function, but in this case, it checks if the repo's parameter isn't skipped. I changed some logic here by including the repo tag and the gist tag name. Then I check if it has repositories, place the repositories section. If it has gists, place the gist section. Then it will commit and push the changes. I have changed the names of these steps from generate portfolio to generate repos, from updated portfolio stats to updated repository stats. I've also changed the latest steps name from generate portfolio into a separate step name called generate gists. I added a repo tag name as an empty string this time to exclude repos. Then I have removed the test error to make it work. Let's also remove the heading, because headings in this markdown list is useless.
One code compilation and git commit later.
Okay, it removed headings for clarity and okay, except the gist one. Let's try that logic anyways.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
It still says no changes to commit despite few things. I created a try-catch block, and inside the try block, I included the Octokit initialization code, the repository fetching code, and the gist fetching code. I have created has repos and has gist constants, which in this case checks if repo's length is positive and the repo tag name is not empty. The same condition applies on the has gists also, but in this case checks the gist's availability. Return these values based on availability. If it has repos, it returns the repo data, otherwise skipped. The same applies to the gists also. That unified logic is better than putting the one logic in the first if, the another logic in the second if.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
What the heck? That's because the title is in the range and the spaces are unneeded. Let's remove the spaces from here and here.
Another code compilation and git commit later.
Okay, that's good. That's extremely good and that's clean. This is more cleaner than the previous logic. Let's release the new version. This is the latest tag version 1.0.2. Oh, comment tags gist start gist end not found in target file. I know why. Because I haven't placed the gist start. Okay. There we go. What is the change here? It just removes the repositories heading. This is what I want. Let's try using the creation stats workflow into my another GitHub account. I created a title which in Armenian means my project. Ayo, yes I am. Then I added the comments tag. it may look like an empty section. Now let's create a workflow called creations.email. I set the workflow name to generate portfolio. That workflow runs every day, but I included the workflow dispatch just in case if it works. I've added the permissions also, and inside that it does some jobs, and the job name is update portfolio, which runs on Ubuntu latest. The first step of this job is the checkout, but on the second job it fetches portfolio straight from GitHub API with options like GitHub username, which I set to the GitHub repository owner, then some exclusions which I excluded some repos, then the commit message. I will use the different commit message this time, updated portfolio stats with recent repository data. Okay.
One code compilation and git commit later.
The generate portfolio workflow appears. Run the workflow.
A few inches later.
There we go! Although all of these projects are standalone projects which I use them to create portfolio in different GitHub account. Some projects inside my main GitHub action works very well. That's great. Making a GitHub action for the first time is a challenge for me. It is a huge challenge. It just took overall 18 failed workflow runs and overall 92 successful workflow run results to make that GitHub action work. I made my own GitHub action and it is a success. Since I have created the all-in-one profile stats, which is still coming soon and it is unfinished, the creation stats GitHub action is just a stable foundation that is challenging for me. Part 2 will build on this GitHub action called all-in-one profile stats. I have built that creations stats all by using Typescript. And with that I have created a successful GitHub action. Hope you enjoyed that GitHub action. That is it, guys. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, join my Patreon, bookmark the blog page, start that GitHub repository, stay safe and have a nice day.